Happy dancers day. Well. Hello and welcome to Princess Dami's Mind. My name is Princess Dami and you're watching me or listening to me from MTM Studio in London, UK. Today, I will be talking to you about a country called Nigeria, the Federal Republic of Nigeria, the country that has been on the international news for terrorist operations for years, with no solution to end it. Nigeria has been well defined as a country that has no regard for justice, truth, lives and properties. Nigeria is a country that has no understanding nor application of the gospel of Christ, yet has thousands of churches littered everywhere. If you're looking for dead education, Nigeria has no shortage of that. If you're not scared of living in darkness, Nigeria is where you must come, because the country is surged into every darkness despite endless sunshine. Nigeria is the headquarters of abject and absolute poverty in the world. It is also a country where humans have no rights and where tongues are being silenced by the abuse of power. Nigeria is a country where cows' lives matter than humans. Nigeria is where advocates for the vulnerable and the weak, for changing social and economic structures, as well as injustice or justice, end up in detention and labeled as terrorists, whilst the real terrorists are being decorated with slavery and golden guns, AK-47. So today, I will be telling you more about Nigeria and our President Mohammadu Buhari. Welcome to my channel. My name is Princess Dami. I'm speaking from MTM Studios in London. Today's topic is President Buhari above the law? And the second question is, can President Buhari be proscribed a terrorist? The purpose of this video today is to make aware of the terrorism law in Nigeria to a wider Nigerians at home and abroad, to see if President Buhari has committed any act of terrorism within the law of Nigeria, to advise Nigerians or the patriotic government to seek help from the international communities such as UN, AU, UK, US, to end terrorism in Nigeria, to solicit help for President Buhari in his administration, if need be, to understand why Nigeria is a failed state, to help Nigerians to make informed decisions about the federalism of Nigeria, and finally, for educational purpose. Well, before I go on, it appears, having studied Nigeria for some time now, the situation that is going on in Nigeria, it appears President Buhari is above the law. Because no one seems to be talking about or doing anything about what goes on in Nigeria within the government departments or the lawmakers or the National Assembly. No one is talking about it to an extent that I believe, or I think they should be talking about these people. Anyway, today I quickly want to show you a video. Then I will come back to comment. Let's go there.
Familiar faces, worn out places, worn out faces, writing letters for the daily.
Underline the word kill there.
Races, going Post-election violence erupted in the mainly Muslim north, but Buhari wanna drown my sorrow. No tomorrow, no tomorrow.
The Nigerian Red Cross says many people were killed and thousands displaced in post-election rioting, protesting the election outcome.
People run in circles, it's a very, very
The Nigerian Red Cross says many people were killed and thousands displaced in post-election rioting, protesting the election outcome. The Nigerian Red Cross says many people were killed and thousands displaced in post-election rioting, protesting the election outcome.
And when inciting an act of terrorism, President Buhari said, if what happened in 2011 should happen again in 2015, by the grace of God, the dog and the baboon would all be soaked in blood. Karijini Birijini, Buhari, 2014. He consistently called for mass action since 2003, with inciting statements at his campaign rallies, for example, lynch them directive of his CPS unguarded campaign utterances in 2011 and inspired the post-election violence that year, and of the strategy of the supporters of the ANPP, especially in Bauchi State in 2007. Justice Ahmed Lemur and his panel verdict said, it is true that Buhari inspired the violence, but it's also true that PDP's rigging machine provoked it. In effect, the report claimed there's an egalitarian share of the blame. So, the justice wasn't disputing the fact that Buhari inspired violence during the election. Also, President Buhari has been promoting religion intolerance in the country when he made a statement saying Sharia should be introduced in full across Nigeria. I will continue to show openly and inside me the total commitment to the Sharia movement that is sweeping all over Nigeria. God willing, will not stop the agitation for the total implementation of the Sharia in the country. It is a legal responsibility which God has given us within the context of one Nigeria to continue to uphold on the practice of Sharia wholeheartedly and to educate non-Muslims that they have nothing to fear. What remains for Muslims in Nigeria is for them to redouble their efforts, educate Muslims on the need to promote the full implementation of Sharia law. This statement is unconstitutional, and this is an act of intolerance of religion in Nigeria. So in this video, I'm gonna be basing my discussions on the laws of Nigeria, the Terrorism Prevention Act 2011, as well as the Constitution of Nigeria. So please do be patient with me because I'm gonna take my time to explain a few things to you. Thank you. According to Section 1.1 of the Terrorism Prevention Act 2011, it says that a person who knowingly does or attempts or threatens to do an act preparatory to or in furtherance of an act of terrorism, or commit to do anything that is reasonably necessary to promote an act of terrorism. I want you to make a note of that word promote. Or assist or facilitate the activities of persons engaged in an act of terrorism commit an offense under this act. So for anyone to commit an offense under this Terrorism Prevention Act 2011, you must have threatened, promote, or assist an act of terrorism. So section 2.2, which starts from here, says that act of terrorism means an act which is deliberately done with malice, aforethought, and which may seriously harm or damage a country or an international organization, or seriously intimidate a population, or seriously destabilize or destroy the fundamental political, constitutional, economic, or social structures of a country or an international organization. I want you to underline, like I've underlined, see the words I've underlined there. Aforethought, at least they must have thought about it beforehand, planned it. And the act must harm or damage somebody or the country, and or intimidate a population, or destabilize the fundamental political or constitutional structures or economic or social structures. So if anyone threatens or promotes or assists or commit any of these offense, so the person should be punished according to the laws, the laws laid out in this Terrorism Act 2011. So this is the law that is guiding them in Nigeria, or guides them in Nigeria. So now, from the previous video that we watched, we can deduce one or two things there. President Buhari promised bloodshed if election was rigged. Promised bloodshed. To have promised bloodshed is that he has threatened to commit a terrorism act. Terrorism Act. Then President Buhari instructed the electorate to kill during his 2011 election campaign. Yes. So if you want to look at the law again, it was promoting an act of terrorism by inciting or asking people to kill. Okay? Now, by releasing a proscribed terrorist organization back into the society, is a decision that could cause serious harm to the citizens and damage the country. Remember, Mr. President has just released about 151 repented Boko Harams back into the community. And you remember, the Boko Haram had been proscribed as terrorists. So the Boko Haram is the proscribed terrorist organization, and he has released them back into the society, which is seriously harmful to the people or could damage the country. Now, number 4, President Buhari had destabilized the constitutional structure by interfering with the state's rights to land and land management. It is also an intimidation on the southern citizens of Nigeria. So here, he had destabilized the constitutional structure, destabilized. So you can see where I'm showing you here, the constitutional structure of Nigeria. Because it is not in the constitution of Nigeria for the federal government to get involved in the land management of the states. Okay, now, when inciting acts of terrorism, I've talked about this before. Okay, let me just go to another point in order not to waste your time. I'm gonna take a few minutes break and I'll be back. Please, bear with me. Hello and welcome back. So now, I'm going to continue with section 2, sub 2 of the Act of Terrorism law. So the section 2 and subsection 2 says that an act of terrorism means an act which is deliberately done with malice aforethought and which an attack upon a person's life which may cause serious bodily harm or death. I want you to note that death. As you can see, when President Buhari incited killings during the election, a lot of people died. So the kidnapping of a person, that is an act of terrorism, which the Fulani men are doing now, and whoever is doing kidnapping in Nigeria as well. So it's an act of terrorism. So for example, Boko Haram and the Fulani men had committed and continue to commit these offenses. Buhari too committed when he instructed death on electorates. He committed this bodily harm or death, this subsection 2(1), attack upon a person's life which may cause serious bodily harm or death. As you can see, a lot of people died during that protest, during that election campaign. Now, section 2(3), subsection 2 says, for the avoidance of doubts, political parties should not be regarded as proscribed organizations, and nobody should be treated as such because of his or her political beliefs. So Sowore is a member of AAC political party, and as such should not be proscribed as a terrorist in his political capacity. Buhari detained him unlawfully, which is an act of terrorism because Sowore is intimidated. Remember, one of the law says if a population or a person is intimidated, it's an act of terrorism. So, and according to section 22B of the Constitution of Nigeria, Buhari had broken that. So anyone who is a member of political party in Nigeria should not be proscribed as a terrorist. But in this matter, Sowore had been proscribed as a terrorist because he wanted to have a revolution now protest. Now, section 2(1)BC of the Terrorism Act law says that where two or more persons associate for the purpose of, or where an organization engages in promoting, encouraging, or exhorting others to commit an act of terrorism, the judge in chambers may, on an application made by the Attorney General, National Security Advisor, or Inspector General of Police on the approval of the President, declare an entity to be a proscribed organization, and the notice should be published in Official Gazette. Now, what this section is trying to tell us is this: that anyone or any organization who is encouraging or promoting terrorism, that person should be proscribed as a terrorist organization. And as you can see, Buhari was encouraging the Boko Haram people. He was encouraging the Fulani herdsmen people in his actions by actually now making the ex-Boko Haram members armies, and by encouraging the Fulani herdsmen to continue with the operation in the southern part of Nigeria. He asked them to continue whatever they're doing there. So the Federal Republic of Nigeria, the government, is an entity because it is a system. Therefore, should be proscribed terrorist because they're encouraging terrorism. I'm going to show you a clip of Chief Femi Fani-Kayode so you can listen to his opinion about this as well. Let's go there.
A very serious issue. Now, why is it that the government does not seek to go to court
and ensure that whoever these people are, these herdsmen, whatever you like to call them, are not branded as terrorists. They go around with AK-47, killing people every day in this country. But the government doesn't talk about it. The government makes no arrest. The government makes no prosecution. They are allowed to do anything they like. And that is the contradiction that many people are worried about. The question is why? Again, you look at Boko Haram. You look at the way the war is being prosecuted against terrorists. When, and you need to go back on this because you need to remember this, when Boko Haram was prescribed in 2013 by the Jonathan government, the people that are in power today, I'm talking about Lai Mohammed specifically, who has just been returned as a minister, he came up and said it was unconstitutional and unacceptable that Boko Haram was prescribed. And Buhari himself, our revered president, has also on various occasions said things like an attack on Boko Haram is an attack on the north.
We don't have any. I just have to make it clear that we do not have any facts to back up.
Well, I will say this to you, and this is the problem. I'm sorry to say this, Osasu. This is a problem I have, which is why Nigerian media is partly to blame for this. This is an undisputed fact. It is on record. It was spoken by him in 2013. It has never been disputed by him. It has never been denied by him.
We would love you to show us.
I can show you after this. I'll show you. If you're happy to bring it, I would have brought it to you.
Okay.
Secondly, I'll also tell you something else which I can also substantiate on, and I've said on many occasions. We have a president who was nominated by Boko Haram in 2013 to be their spokesman during the when they wanted to go into negotiations with the government. These are indisputable. Let me bring it back.
I have to also make this clear because again, journalism is about objectivity and facts. So you will provide us. You will provide us this information.
You know what you will do.
Okay.
You call whoever it is that represents the government to come and dispute that. I will send you the evidence. They have never denied it. I've said this thing over 100 times, so many other people have done it.
Can we expect it from you on your social media handle?
You can get it from me any day. Go
okay,
and read, you know what you do? Go and read all my essays. You'll see the references. Ask any media practitioner. You'll see. Now, let's not get.
No, but let me bring you back to our topic. Just a second.
Let's not get distracted by that. The point I'm making is that in my view, it is also a fact, by the way, that they freed more Boko Haram prisoners than any other. It is also a fact that a military commander recently said that you, as a Boko Haram person, that if you leave the army and you renounce violence, you may end up being president of this country. These are facts.
I want to bring us back to our conversation. Now, you spoke about prescription. We've spoken about IPOB and IMN. Now, and
the ones without arms are prescribed. That's the point. The ones with arms are not prescribed.
However, from a legal angle also, these people have bases and demands. IPOB had their demands. Revolution Now, which is recent, has its demands. Boko Haram has its demand, and they were claiming territories. Now, with the headsmen, this is purely and fully criminal. And I personally believe what's happening is wrong with the criminal activities. However, they haven't come out to say this is our demand. It's different when we are talking about protests that being prescribed.
I'm sorry, let me again educate you a little bit on that. They have made demands. They've said that they want land, and they've got the president, the spokesman of the president of this country, again it can be substantiated, is that he has turned around and said, well, it's better for you, that is Femi Adesina, my good friend of mine, came out and said, well, you have to make a choice. You either give your land up, or you give them or you let them take your life. That is on record. It's never been disputed. Now, let me put this to you, and this is a very serious issue. According to the International Terror Index, the most violent and deadly terrorist organization in the world is Boko Haram. We have treated Boko Haram with kid gloves over the years in this country, and the president and the government that are in power today have freed them and assimilated some of them into the army. One. The fourth most deadly terrorist organization in the world today is what they call the Fulani militants. That's what they call them in the international community. Okay? Recognized by everybody. Yet in Nigeria, the Nigerian government has refused for some reason or reasons best known to themselves to label these people as terrorists and to protect us from them. Nobody has advocated or said others should pick up arms to defend themselves against them. We don't want that. We don't want violence. We're simply saying our government should do something about the real terrorists and leave those that are not carrying arms or threatening violence alone. And that's my position. And that's a responsible and right position. You know why? Because thousands and thousands of people are being killed every day. And all of us, we're all guilty of it.
So I really agree with Chief Femi Fani Kayode. No, it's got a point there. because all these things are quite obvious and they are factual. No one is making them up. So I want to proceed by explaining the Section 25B of the Terrorism Act in Nigeria. And it reads, the Attorney General, upon the approval of the President, may withdraw the order if satisfied that such proscribed organization has ceased to engage in an act of terrorism. That is to say, if those Boko Haram have stopped being terrorists, the government can actually, if the government is satisfied with them, the government may stop proscribing them as terrorists. Okay, and the Constitution goes on to say, the law goes on to say that if he is satisfied that a proscribed organization has ceased to engage in the act of specified in subsection 1 of this section, and that there is no likelihood of the organization engaging in such acts in the future, and shall be published in the official gazette. So the subsection 1 is the one I showed you earlier on, which says, let me go back so you can understand. If they have stopped threatening, if they have stopped seriously harming people, if they have stopped damaging the country, if they have stopped destabilizing, if they have stopped killing people, okay, that is the only time the government can actually stop proscribing them as terrorists. Okay, now, so the Act says, I'm going to read this again because I don't want you to get confused. It says the Attorney General, upon the approval of the President, may withdraw the order if satisfied that such proscribed organization, that is, that such organization like Boko Haram, has stopped to engage in an act of terrorism. Now tell me, has the Boko Haram stopped being engaged in terrorism? The answer is no. Then, if he's satisfied that a proscribed organization has stopped to engage in the acts acts specified in subsection 1, which I've just shown you now, of this section, and that there's no likelihood of the organization engaging in such acts in the future, and shall be published in the official gazette. We all know that Boko Haram is still in existence and still holding on to the captives, including the young girl called Leah. And we're informed by the security agency or the police that any one of them could become the president of Nigeria after repentance. Like you rightly heard Chief Femi Fani-Kayode saying that as well. And right now, all these Boko Haram that were released, they've now joined the Nigerian army. So according to this section of the law, they shouldn't have been released by Mr. President. That's number one, because the organization called Boko Haram is still in existence and is still holding people captive. So it is very wrong for Mr. President to have released these guys, to have even allowed them to come into the society and become armies. Okay, I want to take another opinion from an Uganda man. I can't remember his name right from top of my head right now, but I want you to watch this video. Okay, let's go there. Yes, I remember the man's name now. The man is an Ugandan, and his name is David Yekorach Matsanga. He's a founder and a chairman of Punchline Africa TV. Okay, and on YouTube, you can see his flyer saying something like People's Court. Okay, let's listen to him. Let's take an opinion from him.
I know who the Boko Haram are. And remember the words he used. He knows them. He knows where they are. They can bring about an end to the suffering of the people of northern Nigeria, in Maiduguri area, and the Boko Haram will be history. 100 days. We are now 6 years past. We are 6 years past. Buhari still wears his caps and walks around the African Union telling us that he's once a leader. What type of leader is this? Who cannot solve? If the problem of Boko Haram is too much for Mr. Buhari, why hasn't Mr. Buhari brought this problem to African Union or to the United Nations Security Council. Mr. Buhari was given advice, and the African Union and Americans and other agencies, European Union, wanted to intervene in the problem of Boko Haram, just as we did on AMISOM in Somalia. Mr. Buhari told us to show that Buhari has a hand in Boko Haram because he uses them. He uses them. Now, this is a crying African. I don't mind what you want to do or what you do. This is a crying African. And I'm crying for this Africa. You might be using Boko Haram to kill Nigerians. Because surely what type of president is this who cannot bring a solution to the African Union Peace and Security Council to discuss the issue of Boko Haram? Americans wanted to come in to give him more arms. He did not want. The Boko Haram syndrome has expanded in Niger, Mauritania, Cameroon, Chad, and all the neighboring countries. It is spreading. The nucleus is from Maiduguri in Nigeria. Mr. Buhari always goes out. They get the money from the oil, pump it out, bank it in the city banks. His wife has got an account of $2.5 billion. $2.5 billion. If you can look at that, that is not what we are after. We are after a very serious operation that this country must get rid of Boko Haram. The killings, whether you are killing a Fulani, whether you are killing an Igbo, these are Nigerians who are dying. We would like to call upon the government of Nigeria and the international community now to come in forcefully to help us to get rid of or bring up a mechanism, or ECOWAS to bring a mechanism on how to fight Boko Haram, which has defeated Mr. Buhari from fighting. Because he uses them to kill the Igbos. It's a straightforward answer. You know, Africa needs Nkrumahs.
So that was the voice of Mr. David Jikurach Matsanga, founder and chairman of Punchline Africa TV. I just extracted that information from one of his videos. Okay, now let's continue. Section 4 of the Terrorism Act is about support for terrorism, and it states like that a person who knowingly in any manner solicit or render support for an act of terrorism or a proscribed organization or an internationally suspected terrorist group, an offense under this act, and shall, that is, that person commit an offense under this act and shall, on conviction, be liable to imprisonment for a maximum term of 20 years. So, a person who knowingly, in any manner, solicit or render support for, I'm now going to the second subsection, without prejudice to subsection 2 of this section, where death results from any act of terrorist from any terrorist act, the penalty shall be death sentence. So, if anyone supports any act of terrorism, if anyone supports a proscribed organization like Boko Haram, yes, if anyone supports them, that person is liable to go to imprisonment for a maximum term of 20 years. If anyone renders support, for the purpose of subsection 1 of this section, support includes, what they mean by support means, incitement to commit a terrorist act, e.g., instruction to kill during election campaign of 2011. Support also includes to offer material assistance like weapons, biological weapons, chemical weapons, nuclear weapons, explosive training, transportation, force documentation or identification. So you can see in this instance, Mr. Buhari or President Buhari had offered material assistance to the Boko Haram by actually even giving them weapons to become armies, because if they become army in Nigeria, they will be carrying weapons. If they become army in Nigeria, that they've become armies already, they will be trained. Yes, and it will give them all the weapons necessary for armies to carry. And because there's still proscribed organization, Boko Haram is still a proscribed organization everywhere in the world. They have not ceased being terrorists. So it was very wrong of Mr. Buhari to have brought these ex-Boko Haram boys back into the society and even make them armies. For doing this kind of nonsense, yes, it is 20 years imprisonment maximum for Buhari for doing this. That's the penalty. This is the law of Nigeria. I'm not making it up. This is the law of Nigeria. And for example, Mr. Buhari or President Buhari provided radio station for the killer Fulani herdsmen. This is a support for terrorism because he has offered material assistance to them. Provision of radio station for killer Fulani herdsmen. Also, the support means to offer or provision of moral assistance, including invitation to adhere to a prescribed organization. Invitation to adhere to a prescribed organization. Moral assistance, giving moral assistance. So, for example, asking killer herdsmen to remain in the south until they finish whatever operation they're doing in there, knowing fully well that the operation they're doing there is killing people. The last subsection, which is D, says the meaning of support means the provision of or making available such financial or other related services as may be prescribed in this act. For instance, by giving them rural land settlement. It is a provision of financial assistance, because if they have to buy land for themselves, they have to pay. But now, if Buhari is giving them free land, it's a kind of financial assistance to the herdsmen, the killer herdsmen. So what this section means is that Mr. President Buhari is in breach of the law under the Terrorism Act, which is a maximum of 20 years imprisonment for supporting acts of terrorism. Well, Terrorism Act of President Buhari, let me summarize it here. He advised the electorates to kill in year 2011 election campaign due to that instruction, there was violence and a lot of people were killed. He threatened bloodshed if election was rigged. He ordered unlawful arrests and killings of protesters across Nigeria, the Shiites, the IPOBs, the Revolution Now, and so many other people that protested. He morally and materially supported the killer Fulani herdsmen with provision of radio station and rural land. He also asked them to remain in the south to finish their operations, knowing fully well that their operations are killing, raping, and destroying farmlands. He released over 200 Boko Haram members, despite the fact that the proscribed organization is still in operation. He is silent on the killings, kidnappings, and human rituals going on in Nigeria, despite the fact that he has the power, the constitutional power, to control all these insurgencies, but he refused to. Like you rightly heard the gentleman from Uganda, he said President Buhari refused to take help from the international communities and even from other African nations. And you heard very well when Chief Fani Kayode said that the Boko Haram of today were the one that President Buhari was advocating for during a particular election campaign in Nigeria. So he knows them fully well. He knows the Boko Haram. He is the spokesperson for the Boko Haram. So he is supporting the terrorism that's going on in Nigeria. He refused to seek help from the international communities to combat terrorism. He said he knows who the Boko Harams are, but refused to disclose their identities and deal with them according to the terrorism law. And he maliciously arrested and detained Sowore unlawfully, the man who was not carrying any gun, the man who was not killing anybody, the man who was he was planning a protest under the Constitution of Nigeria. Mr. Buhari caused damage to the constitutional structure by disregarding the Land Act law. He is in breach of the Constitution of Nigeria. He refuses to deploy the security forces across the nation to combat the terrorists. Instead, he ordered the killings of the armies who were disobedient to face Boko Haram due to inadequate military weapons. Can you imagine? He's killing even the true armies, the original armies, because they didn't want to go to war. They didn't want to face the Boko Haram because they were not well equipped. And he ordered them to be killed. That is an act of terrorism. It's inflicting bodily harm to people. It's inflicting death upon people unnecessarily. President Buhari also vowed to force Sharia law or religion on Nigerians, which is a breach of the Constitution. I read that to you earlier on. He failed to curb, to investigate and bring to justice the police brutality and terrorism across the nation. And Buhari turns peaceful protests into Terrorism Act. I want to show you a video again about how Nigerians are being disgraced internationally by the actions of the National Assembly or the lawmakers. Let's go there. Sorry folks, I'm going to show you another video instead because the other video is not coming up. So I'll show you the mass burial of Fulani victims in Nigeria. Let's take a look at that instead. These are the victims of the Fulani S-men in Benue, Nigeria, some months back. And this is a mass burial for them. This is appalling. This is disgraceful. This is disgusting. This is heartbreaking. Can you see how many trucks that are carrying the dead bodies? This is what Fulani herdsmen are doing in Nigeria and continue to do. So Fulani herdsmen are doing their own, the Boko Harams are doing their own. Yet the Fulani herdsmen are not proscribed terrorists. And the Boko Haram are now in the armies. Can you see another truck is coming? Another truck of dead bodies. Dead bodies. Okay. Enough of that. There's so many trucks, many trucks carrying dead bodies. These are the 54 Nigerian soldiers on death row for refusal to fight Boko Haram. And these are the Revolution Now protesters, and this is how police treat people in Nigeria, tear gassing the peaceful protesters and arresting them. Some were being shot. So there's so many different videos, different pictures of protests in Nigeria and what had been done to them. Killings, So Buhari doesn't care about anybody. He's just killing anyone that he could kill. Yeah. So these are the pictures of the protests in Nigeria various times, and these are the victims of Boko Haram, Fulani herdsmen. See? And these are the victims of police. See? And people actually protested about against the police brutality in Nigeria. So Buhari is not in control of anything, and he doesn't want to do anything because he has an agenda. Now, this is an extract from the Constitution of Nigeria and what Oni of Ife basically asked President Buhari to do, and which everyone has been asking him to do. So according to the Constitution of Nigeria, section 217, section 1, it says there shall be an armed forces for the Federation, which shall consist of an army, a navy, and an air force, and such other branches of the armed forces of the Federation as may be established by an act of the National Assembly. The Federation shall subject to an act of the National Assembly made in that behalf, equip and maintain the armed forces as may be considered adequate and effective for the purpose of defending Nigeria from external aggression, maintaining its territorial integrity, and securing its borders from violation on land, sea, or air. So we have not been seeing this happening at all in Nigeria. Buhari has the power to do all of this. The National Assembly has the power to do all of this, and they are not doing it. Well, to add salt to these injuries, President Buhari endorsed the operation of the killer Fulani herdsmen by adding their photo inside the Nigerian passport. This action speaks volume, and it is careless. It is very careless. So now the question is this: how can the Nigerians or the international communities help President Buhari to understand the law that governs Nigeria and to abide by them so that he could have a successful and peaceful 4 years of presidency? And who could advise him that he had committed terrorism acts? Or who could bring him to justice? So President Buhari is busy proscribing Showore as a terrorist when himself has committed so many acts of terrorism and Showore didn't commit any. So who could bring President Buhari to justice? Everyone knows that if President Buhari doesn't release Omoyele Showore, the Federation will surely split. The center will not hold. So the question I'm putting to you all again is this: is President Buhari above the law? The answer to that question is capital no. President Buhari is not above the law. Section 1:1 of the Nigerian Constitution states that this constitution is supreme and its provision shall have binding force on the authorities and persons throughout the Federal Republic of Nigeria. You underline the word authorities. This means Buhari and whoever is in authority. Section 14:1, Section 14 sub 1 says of the Constitution states that the Federal Republic of Nigeria shall be a state based on the principles of democracy and social justice. It is hereby accordingly declared its sovereignty belongs to the people of Nigeria, from whom government through this Constitution derives all its powers and authority. The security and welfare of the people shall be the primary purpose of the government. All of this doesn't happen in Nigeria. There's no democracy. There's no democracy. The sovereignty of the people has been hijacked by the government. Section 23 states that the national ethics shall be discipline, integrity, dignity of labor, social justice, religious tolerance, self-reliance, and patriotism. You can see there's no religious tolerance. Once Buhari had vowed that he wants to introduce or enforce Sharia to everyone in Nigeria. So Section 24C says, respect the dignity of other citizens and the rights and legitimate interest of others, and live in unity and harmony and in the spirit of common brotherhood. As you can see, there's no respect for Sowore or for anybody or for protesters. For them to express their interest, their own legitimate interest. Moving on from there, who then could bring President Buhari to justice if he is not above the law and have breached the law? Section 137, subsection 1 of the Constitution of Nigeria states that a person shall not be qualified for election to the office of president if he has presented a forged certificate to the Independent National, that is INEC, to the Independent National Electoral Commission. Now that it is evident that Mr. Buhari or President Buhari had forged his certificate, he is in breach of this law. Below is what could be done about it. Section 1431 states that the president or vice president may be removed from office in accordance with the provisions of this section. So Buhari could be removed for the forgery of the certificate. Whenever a notice of any allegation in writing signed by not less than 1/3 of the members of the National Assembly, I underline the members of the National Assembly, is presented to the President of the Senate, stating that the holder of the office of President or Vice President is guilty of gross misconduct in the performance of the functions of its office, detailed particulars of which shall be specified, the President of the Senate shall, within 7 days of the receipt of the notice, cause a copy thereof to be served on the holder of the office and on each member of the National Assembly, and shall also cause any statement made in reply to the allegation by the holder of the office to be served on each member of the National Assembly. Within 14 days of the presentation of the notice to the President of the Senate, whether or not any statement was made by the holder of the office in reply to the allegation contained in the notice, each house of the National Assembly shall resolve by motion without any debate whether or not the allegation shall be investigated. So, members of the National Assembly could remove President Buhari for gross misconduct, forgery of certificate, and for acts of terrorism. Finally, if the National Assembly members were corrupt and refused to remove President Buhari, the last resort for Nigerians, being represented now by senior advocates of Nigeria and human rights activists, is to seek international help by reporting the matter to the United Nations Security Council and seek other international communities' help to resolve the insurgency in the country. They may want to consider countries like USA, Russia, China, Africa countries, or whoever they want or they trust for alliance. Everyone knows that if President Buhari does not release Omoyele Sowore, the federation will surely split. The center will not hold. Now that the Boko Harams are in the army, Nigeria should not expect ice on the cake, but thorn in the flesh. The insurgency is going nowhere, but only just begun. May God help the people of Nigeria, because there's the battle of Armageddon ahead. Be prepared. Many thanks.